So for number 4, it says graph using factored intercept form, meaning we're using our P and our Q. Well, I actually want to change this, so instead of saying y equals x minus 3 times x minus 4, I'm going to say f of x equals x plus 3, and I'm going to say x minus 1, okay? So now our P is going to be negative 3, and our Q is a positive 1. So when I graph 1 and negative 3, I want to find my axis of symmetry. Well, you could do P plus Q divided by 2 to find your axis of symmetry, or you can eyeball it. Either way, absolutely works. My axis of symmetry is negative 1. So when x equals negative 1, how do I find y? Well, I have my x, so I'm just going to then plug it in for every x value into my equation. So I'm going to get f of x equals negative 1 plus 3 times negative 1 minus 1. And that's going to give me negative 1 plus 3 is a positive 2. Negative 1 minus 1 is a negative 2. All right, so that is negative 4. Now I know my y value, and my vertex is going to be at negative 1, negative 4. If I'm to graph this at negative 1, negative 4, I'm looking at my slope. My slope is whatever number is here, which is secretly a 1. So I'm going to go up 1 over 1, and then the next point should be up 4 over 2, which they are indeed. So now I can just draw my graph. All right, moving on to number 5. Number 5 says which function is represented by the graph. If I'm looking at all my functions, they're all P and Q. So what I need to find are my x-intercepts. My x-intercepts, if I'm looking really closely at the graph, my x-intercepts are going to be right here and right here, which means it's a negative 2 and a positive 3. So I should be looking for a p that's a negative 2 and a q that's a negative 3, or vice versa. So if we're looking at our A, B, C, and D, well, negative 2, that's going to be the opposite. So that means it's going to be a positive 2, meaning A and B are out. And then a positive 3, that's going to be the opposite, which means it's going to be a negative 3. And the only one with the negative 3 is C. So that will be your answer. Then moving on to number 6, it says solve by factoring. Well, first I'm probably going to want to move this guy over, right? So I'm going to want to add 5 to each side to get that equal to 0. So I have x squared minus 11x, well, 19 plus 5. That's going to be plus 24 equals 0. Now remember, I use my diamond. My C goes in the top and my B goes in the bottom. So my C is 24 and my B is negative 11. So what multiply to 24 that add to negative 11? Well, factors of 24 are 6 and 4, and then negative 6, negative 4, well, that adds to negative 10. Then it's, well, 12 and 2, and negative 12 and 2, and negative 2, which adds to negative 14. And then there's negative 8 and negative 3, well, that adds to negative 11. So I can add negative 8 and negative 3 into my diamond. Now, if I were to rewrite this, I know it's going to be x minus 3 times x minus 8 equals 0. Well, if it equals 0, that means I have to what? I have to split this into 2 equations. So I'm going to have x minus 3 equals 0, and then x minus 8 equals 0. X minus 3 equals 0, well, solve for x, I add 3 to each side, I get x equals a positive 3. For x minus 8 equals 0, I add 8 to each side, and I get x equals a positive 8. And here are your 2 answers, and that's how you would solve by factoring. What about number 7? Number 7, well, first, again, I want to get this 5 over, so I'm going to subtract 5 from each side, which will give me 3r squared minus 16r, and then negative 7 minus another 5, well, that's going to be negative 12, and that equals 0. Something I would want to consider is, well, can 3 go into everything? And it can't, right? 3 can't go into 16 nicely. So what I would do is I would do my steps, right? And my first step would be times a by c. Well, this is my a and this is my c. So I have 3 times negative 12, which equals negative 36. And then I need to write all my factors for negative 36 to be able to decide what ones will add up to negative 16. So I have negative 36, that's negative 6, positive 6, that adds up to 0. I have negative 12, right, and 3, that adds up to, well, it adds up to negative 9. I have positive 12, negative 3. That adds to positive 9. I have, what about negative 2 and a positive 18? Well, that gives me a positive 16, so that means negative 18 plus a positive 2 will give me a negative 16, and there you go. So these are going to be the factors I use. So now I need to rewrite my equation. I get 3r squared, and then we're going to have minus 18r plus 2r minus 12. That equals 0. So now let's group by factoring. And grouping by factoring, if we're looking at this, I'm only going to look at this first section and this second section in two pieces. So the first section, I can factor out a 3r. And 3r times what gives you r squared? Well, that's r. And then 3r times what gives you negative 18r? That's r minus 6. All right, and then I have, well, I'll take out a 2. And I factor out a 2, I get an r minus 6 again, and that equals 0. Now I can regroup and totally regroup by factoring by taking these guys out, right? I'm going to take these guys out, so I'll have r minus 6 as my one factor, and then I'm left with 3r plus 2. So I'm going to have 3r plus 2, and this equals 0. Now I still have to solve for r. So when I have a and b equals 0, I split them up. I have r minus 6 equals 0, and I have 3r plus 2 equals 0. All right, so r minus 6, well, I'm going to add 6 to each side, so I get r equals a positive 6. For this one, I'll subtract 2 for each side. I get 3r equals negative 2, and then to get r alone, I'll divide by 3. So r ends up equaling a positive 6, and you get r equals a negative 2/3. And here are your two answers. All right, so moving on to problem number 8. Problem number 8 we recently have done. It's in the modeling 4.9 where it says write the equation for the parabola described and where I have a vertex and a point. So again, I'm going to be using y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. And this is going to be my h and my k, and this is going to be my x and my y. So what I'm really looking for is a, so I'll fill everything in. My y is 5, so I get 5 equals, don't know a. My x is 4, my h is 2, and then my k is 1. So now let's simplify. I get 5 equals a times 4 minus 2 is 2 squared plus 1. 5 equals, well, 2 squared equals 4, so I get 4a plus 1. All right, let's subtract 1 from each side to get a alone. So I'm going to bring it up here. I get 4 equals 4a. Well, now to get a alone again, I'll divide by 4 by each side. So I end up getting 1 equals a. Now I can completely rewrite my equation, all right, in the vertex form. I can write it as, well, let's straighten this out a little bit. I can write it as y equals, all right, my a is 1, and it's going to be x minus, I know my h is 2, squared, and I know my k is 1. So this would be your final answer for that. All right, let's try one more. But now we're using x-intercept. So instead of using the y equals a times x minus h squared plus k, we're going to use y equals x minus, well, there's an a, x minus p times x minus q. All right, and we're still trying to find this little secretive a, but now I know that my x-intercepts are -3 and -2, and this is my x and y. All right, so we don't have hk, but we have our p and q. So I'm going to fill out y. Well, I know y. Y is -6, and that equals, I don't know a, I know x, it's -4. I know p, which is the opposite, so it's +3. I know it's going to be -4 again, and I know q, which is the opposite, so it's +2. All right, let's simplify. Again, -6 equals a, -4 plus 3 is -1, -4 plus 2 is -2. So I end up getting -6 equals 2a. Well, to get a alone, divide each side by 2, which gives you -3 equals a. Now I'm going to use that information, right, to fill out that. So then I'm going to have as my final answer y equals -3 times x. Well, here's the thing. I know p, x plus 3, and then I know q, which is x plus 2. So here would be my final result and my final answer.